all season, as we'll be hosting the CW Network studio show every Saturday with a bunch of rotating panel of experts, as the CW will be coast to coast. They got the ACC, they got the Pac-12, and of course, he'll also be doing the NFL Network. Mike Yam joins us. How you doing, Mike? What's going on? How are you today?
Doing great, guys. Always appreciate the invite.
Thank you for joining us. So you're going to know every single nugget with Washington State and Oregon State, aren't you? Because you're on a lot. They're on every week. The CW.
Give me a couple weeks to make sure that the prep is in hand, and we'll get you a little bit more than just some of those preseason nuggets. But you're right, man. Certainly looking forward to it, and I think it's just a really good spot from a Pac-12 perspective. You know, one of the biggest issues that league had was eyeballs and distribution, and now that it's just the two teams, which is unfortunate from a fan's perspective, and certainly for a lot of the athletes on those campuses, you know, the fact that they're now in 100% of homes across the country, to me, is certainly a big win for the league and those two teams that are still there.
And another win for us fans, specifically here in Arizona, is bringing back Thom Brennaman. Tom is a friend of ours. I'm a little biased because we both went to Ohio U, and I'm a big fan of what he's been doing in his career, and I'm glad that he'll be one of the leads on the CW.
Yeah, look, it's big time. And I think even just beyond Tom, too, and got a chance to spend some time with him at ACC Media Days, you know, clearly there's, you know, in the recent history that, you know, and some of the issues that he had while he was on air, I think just even getting to know him a little bit more and understanding, you look, we all make mistakes. I think if we're all judged on our lowest, you know, sort of like the worst thing that we've done, I don't know how many people would be working right now. So thrilled for him to get another opportunity, and he's going to get paired up with Max Brown, who I've known for a bunch of years, who spent some time obviously at USC as their quarterback and at Pitt. So those guys will be doing the ACC games, and I know Ted Robinson was on with you guys most recently. He'll be teamed with Ryan Leaf. So across the board, man, just a lot of really good dudes.
And Mike, I can imagine for you kind of leading the charge, you know, part of the band being all together at doggone Yogi Roth. I mean, he flew the coop, for crying out loud. So when you look at, you know, at CW and covering this particular way, what are some of the insights I think a lot of folks aren't familiar with the conference and what have you that will be brought to light prior to the season starting?
Yeah, look, and by the way, on the Yogi front, there was a recruiting spell.
I bet.
You know, so he's doing his own thing, and he's hanging out, living the SoCal life, but he'll be hitting obviously the Big Ten conference in such a big way. And I'm glad, because obviously what the league from a Pac-12 perspective got broken apart. So there's some coverage across the board, which is, you know, at least in my mind, that's a positive. We got a West Coast voice covering some of those West Coast teams. And I think Fox and the Big Ten Network scored a home run with him and that hire. But you're right. Look, I think from an ACC perspective, even just getting some familiarity with Cal and Stanford in the mix, this is a good league. And, you know, it's some winning teams. And I think the notable brands that are there, whether it's the Clemsons or the Florida States of the world, people know what those brands, because we all grew up watching them. But, you know, you insert a school like SMU, for example, who I think has got a real opportunity to thrive this year. I'll throw Virginia Tech. Maybe a lot of people aren't talking about that squad. I'll throw Miami into the mix. Mario Cristobal, another familiar name that we know from the West Coast with his ties at Oregon. I think the league is going to be good. And I think from, you know, look, the Pac-12 schools like Oregon State, Washington State, you're not going to see necessarily those matchups. But I think from a Pac-12 perspective, we got an expanded playoff. Who knows what's going to happen? We know we're going to have at least one G5 team that's going to be in the postseason. So to me, if those teams are going to be able to mimic some of the recent success that they've had, that's going to be a win. I think it's a little bit more of an uphill battle, you know, for Trent Bray, just looking at that roster. But I think the world of what Jonathan Smith was able to accomplish at his time at Oregon State. And I think Jake Dickert has got an opportunity now that they've moved on from Cam Ward. That offense is going to take a hit, but they got some returning firepower and they hit the portal. I think there's some decent pieces in place.
Mike Yam is our guest, the great author of Fried Rice and Marinara. You're listening to him on the Right Toyota guest line. All right, so my question is this. Now, we all know that Christian McCaffrey really won the Heisman Trophy, but that East Coast bias hosed everybody. So how does a West Coast guy translate now to being an East Coast guy where the majority of the teams are located, Mike?
Yeah, well, look, hey, first of all, thank you for bringing up the book. You guys are awesome, and you always do that for me, and it was a passion project, and I appreciate it. Two, you're 100% accurate. Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman. We're seeing the success that he's had, obviously, at the NFL level. There is few and far between the players where you don't go to the bathroom when you think there's a chance that they're going to get the ball in their hands. And Christian McCaffrey, when he was at Stanford, was on that list, but this is going to be really unique in the evolution of college football, because you're right. We can focus in on some of these teams in the SEC or the Big Ten, but the reality is the lens just gets a little bit bigger, more from a Big Ten perspective when you talk about some of the West Coast schools that they've brought in, whether it's UCLA, and we'll throw SC into the mix. I think that conversation changes, but I also think it changes because of the eyeballs and the distribution and that they're going to get these primetime slots. The games are going to be tremendous, and they're going to have an opportunity to score big wins against notable teams. Now, I'm like the last guy that wanted to see the league break apart, but I got to tell you, I look at those games that we're going to get treated as from a fan perspective in the Big Ten Conference, and it's going to be awesome. Like every single week, there's must-see television that's there, and it's golden opportunities for West Coast players make a name for themselves and thrust them into that Heisman conversation.
Mike, as training camps in the National Football League have kind of winded down, you were on somewhat of a tour there, jumping around. Is there one training camp that you really enjoyed more than the others?
Well, look, I'm a little biased just because my mom's in Baltimore. So the fact that I got to
Nice.
see the Ravens, who we'll double dip here, because last year I thought the Ravens were the best team in the NFL. And look, you can't make the claim because of what happened in that AFC Championship game. But I look at an MVP, I look at a balanced attack, and defensively they were, arguably the best team in the NFL. I think they're going to be able to duplicate that success this season. So when you can mix a little bit of the work and the pleasure together, that's always a win. But honestly, like I'm almost disappointed now that I saw the Atlanta Falcons. I was in Atlanta, and I didn't get to see them, knowing that Matthew Judon and Simmons are going to be there. Like that team, I think that conversation is different from the one that we had 2 weeks ago when we were in that city. I look at that division, and I felt like they could compete and maybe win. But now, just knowing what those additions are going to be on the defensive side, I like that roster maybe a smidge better than Tampa Bay's.
When you guys do all your reports and you go around, you kind of anchor and get the reports from these guys at all these training camps. And now we see Jaden Daniels is pretty much going to be the starter for the Commanders. And
sure.
Then you look at Minshew. I watched that game, saw you guys afterwards, going to be the starter for the Raiders, $25 million later. And then you just talk about Atlanta with Penix. And then you got Bo Nix at Denver. Bo Nix may or may not be the starter, what have you. But when you talk to the guys that are covering these young rookie quarterbacks, what stands out more, or it stands out more so today than yesteryear when these young guys were coming through the league?
Well, I think the one theme, and you guys know this because you cover the college game as well as anyone, then obviously move on to the NFL and you see this maturity process with a lot of these quarterbacks. But I'm always fascinated by the guys where the moment doesn't feel too big for them. And, you mentioned Bo Nix. Last night we were in studio on NFL Network and we had Packers and Broncos. So Bo Nix is going to be their starting quarterback. I know Sean Payton hasn't announced it just yet, but I look at the disparity of drives in week one of the preseason, getting the start obviously yesterday, and the success that he had. I mean, dude was 8 and 9, whatever it was, 80, 90 yards, threw for a touchdown. I mean, used his legs out there. Bo's going to be the starting quarterback, in my opinion, for the Broncos. And, I was working with Gerald McCoy and Brian Baldinger last night. We're having these conversations off air. Baldy turned to us and he's like, man, like, if you're a fan of the league, you want a lot of these young guys to do well because you can't win without a quarterback. And not only that, but just the health of the league in general. Like it all centers around that position. That's why these guys are making as much money as they are. You can't win without a top flight quarterback. And I think even if you are in that second tier of quarterbacks, you're still going to be compensated, generational wealth. I mean, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, to name a few. We're going to have this conversation about Brock Purdy when it comes time for his deal to come up. These guys are making $200 million over the course of a few seasons. That annual salary, I think I even mentioned this to you last time I was on. Look at the salary caps in these teams in the NFL. That quarterback spot alone is taking up 25, 30% of the cap. it is so significant, and all these teams know, and that's why when it's Gardner Minshew who you name check, like Aiden O'Connell's going to get burned this year. 67 quarterbacks saw action last year. I'm a Giants fan. I saw Tommy DeVito out there, Tyrod Taylor. These guys will go and play, and it was fun. The Tommy DeVito run was fun. I hope Daniel Jones is a little bit smarter with some of his throws than what we saw over the weekend, against Houston. But in my mind, it's such a valuable position, and these guys, these younger quarterbacks, it doesn't feel too big.
What's the buzz at the network with the Arizona Cardinals, if there is any at all? Too early? Maybe?
Well, a little early. I think there's cautious optimism. I bring them up because I'm a Kyler fan. When he's at his best, Kyler's as dangerous as anyone in the league at that position. I mean, we've seen this team. A couple of years ago, there was that. What did they start? 8-1, 7-1, something along those lines. I mean, they came out of the gates and they were rolling. I think this team did well in the draft. It felt like every 5 picks, Arizona was back on the clock. But you look at various positions, and they were able to grab some really significant talent. But you guys know, I mean, this division is difficult to navigate, and it all centers around, not to beat a dead horse here, on the health of the quarterback. If Kyler's right, why not that team making some noise? But as far as the conversations inside NFL HQ, I'll be honest with you, it's got to go and prove it, because they're not getting a ton of love on our network just based off of recent results. But I do think they're in a position, and it may not be a win-loss record, but I do think from a fan perspective, it's going to be a better product, and this slow growth, and maybe we're having a different conversation a year from now around this team.
All right, Mr. Giants fan, Malik Neighbors, the buzz, as Rock said, buzz. I mean, this kid, I'm watching your highlights. I'm going, okay, yeah, I'm sure he's pretty good. I'm watching these catches. I'm watching all these shenanigans catching behind the bag. I mean, what is it in particular when you talk to the Giants staff that they're mostly impressed with?
He is an absolute monster. And I know we got a chance to hear what the Giants think about him as we watched Hard Knocks on HBO. I grew up in New Jersey, outside of that New York area. College football is not on the thoughts of a lot of fans in Midtown Manhattan. You know, they're rocking Knicks jerseys, Yankees hats, which pains me as a Mets fan, but which is kind of the reality of what that city is. They knew the name Malik Neighbors, right? Because there's all this buzz and hype around him. They probably weren't watching him, though, on campus and thriving at LSU. They watched that preseason performance and they said, oh boy, like, this is the reason why there's so much hype. This was a historic wide receiver class. Marvin Harrison, we know what he potentially could do. I'll throw Neighbors into the mix. I'll throw his other teammate in, Brian Thomas, who just seems like he's making play after play in limited reps down in Jacksonville. Rome Odunze is going to have a great opportunity with Caleb Williams. This is a great class, but Malik Neighbors, I saw, and I watched his games. I saw some of those catches that he made over the weekend in a preseason match. I'm thinking to myself, thank God he's on our team.
Let me just follow up then, since you are a Giants fan. I think Daniel Jones is not that bad of a QB. I saw the 2 picks that he threw. It's freaking preseason. After he got past those 2 picks, he played reasonably well. Where are you on Daniel Jones? Because most Giant fans are screaming that he needs to go.
Preach, brother. Preach. Give me some optimism here. I'm with you. The 2 throws, I said this to Gerald McCoy during one of our shows last night. I said, every time I look up on NFL Network, if I'm not working, and hell, even the shows that I am working, what are we showing? The pick 6, Daniel Jones, maybe just throw the ball away. Don't take the safety. He underthrew, and Stingley came up with a good play, but he underthrew Jalen Hyatt on that second interception that he threw. Outside of that, there was confidence, and I think Brian Baldinger hit the nail on the head last night. That offensive line, and I will trust him on offensive line play more than anyone else. When he came back and he said, look, they restructured their team and their offseason priorities to focus in obviously on Neighbors at the wide receiver spot, but really to put assets around Daniel Jones. And that offensive line was patchwork. They were calling guys up off the street last year because there were so many injuries. Baldy said it. That offensive line looked as good as he's seen in recent years around that Giants team. So there is some optimism. There was some rust for Daniel Jones. Let's not forget, I think it was week 9 off the top of the dome when he got hurt with the injury. So it's been a while since he's seen real live reps. It's not practice anymore. To me, it's cringeworthy to see the pick 6 like that, but I will hold judgment till we get to to week 1 of the season, because a couple years ago when he was healthy, they got to the postseason and they won a road playoff game. And, if that is the recipe again this year, I'd take it as a Giants fan.
Mike, thanks for the time. We'll be watching as we always do. Thank you.
You guys are the best. Thanks for the invite.
Mike Yam, Mike_Yam on Twitter X. Appreciate him taking some time. CW Network and NFL Network. By the way, quick congratulations to the Arizona Rattlers for winning the IFL National Championship on Saturday as they defeated Massachusetts 53-16 in front of 1,900 fans.
1,900
out there in Henderson. Unfortunate, but Dalton Snead had a hell of a game.
What do you mean hell of a game?
Yeah, there was 29-zip at halftime. I'm sitting there following this thing, and they crushed it. But that's not good. 1,900 fans. I think probably the majority of them were probably just fans from Vegas going to go. What are you going to do this afternoon? Let's go watch a IFL championship.
Yeah.
IFL.
He didn't have to do anything. Didn't he throw for like 50 yards? Or something?
He had like 3 or 4 touchdown runs, I believe.
Yeah.
He was running all over the place. MVP 2 years back to back.
Oh,
That's what you learn in the lab, Rock. You learn how to run, you learn how to throw, you learn how all those kind of things.
Yeah, he passed for 67 yards in an arena football game.
Yeah.
But you're right. He had 2 touchdowns,
Yeah.
So he didn't even play the fourth quarter.
No,
I
he
think.
didn't. No.
Jeez. How about that? All right. We're going to catch up with Casey Walsh from the Sportsbook here in Casino, Arizona next. It's Rock and Manuch. Jimmy B right here on Fox Sports 9.